به نام خداوند جان و خرد.
In the name of the Lord of life and wisdom. In the realm of control, we enter the domain of control skills, perhaps as pioneers or as the latest innovators. We're embarking on a discussion of a highly practical skill that humans desperately need for their daily lives. This system is built upon a foundation, and that foundation is the concept of control reaction. What is control? It means creating a system that keeps us from going to extremes in any behavior. It means not exceeding the norm, nor falling behind it. An example of control can be seen in traffic. When you enter a highway, there are signs that indicate the speed limit for each lane. It tells you the maximum speed you can go and the minimum speed you should maintain. For instance, if the maximum speed is 120 kilometers per hour, the minimum speed will be 70 kilometers per hour. If someone decides to drive slower than the minimum speed, it can cause an accident. Likewise, if they decide to drive faster than the maximum speed, it will also lead to an accident. This is because the highway is made up of lanes that are defined, and if everyone follows the rules, the most balanced driving condition will occur, and no accidents will happen. This is because traffic is controlled. No one drives too fast or too slow. Another important aspect of control is supervision. Again, if we need an example, air traffic control at an airport is one that can help us understand this concept. There, supervisors and experts sit and watch the aircraft from the moment it enters the runway until it is parked, or from the moment it leaves the parking lot until it takes off. They constantly monitor the planes directly and without interruption. This direct and uninterrupted supervision is a form of control from above, and this control from above is what we want to talk about. We need to have a tower inside ourselves, like an airport tower, that can put us in a position of control. Therefore, the first and most important discussion in the realm of control is the creation of a control tower that we must build within ourselves. None of us humans have a control tower inside of us. After hearing this discussion, the first thing you should think about is building such a tower within yourself and positioning yourself within it. Your behaviors are like airplanes that land and take off on this runway, so you control them from that position. You say, Airplane X, you can land now. Airplane Y, you can take off now. Airplane Z, wait a bit for the next plane to park. With these decisions, with this kind of perspective, and with this position you create, you can control your own behaviors. Now, these behaviors, which are often the cause of problems, come in many different forms, and we'll talk about some of the most important ones here. One of the issues that we need to constantly control is anger. For whatever reason, humans experience anger. However, it's important to note that this can have three dimensions. Human anger can stem from three sources. One of these sources is physical. When you consume foods that can make you nervous, the first thing to do is to stop those eating habits. For example, in Iranian medicine, it is said that if someone eats bile-producing foods, they will experience explosive anger. Or if they eat melancholy-producing foods, they will experience sudden insanity, meaning uncontrolled behavior. So, when Iranian wise men encountered someone, the first thing they did was to control their food intake, which is a very good approach. We must identify the foods that cause humans to exhibit explosive, angry behaviors and guide people to avoid them. Bile-producing foods can mainly cause these types of behavior, and melancholy-producing foods can exacerbate this state. This discussion is now becoming more medical and technical. Specialists who work in this field and have clinical experience can bring their knowledge to the table, and their input will certainly be very helpful and crucial.
Continuing the discussions of Professor Danesh, we go to one of the top and renowned specialists in the field, Dr. Davood Naseh. We ask him to explain more about this matter for us. What is the choleric and what is the melancholic? and how these temperaments help to intensify anger and rage in people and causes a person to be unable to control his anger. We asked him to give us the necessary solutions in this regard. Let's listen together.
Hello, beautiful souls. As my mentor, Prof.Danesh mentioned, anger has different levels. One level, which is closely related to my field of work, is about natural elements and temperaments, particularly important in traditional Iranian medicine. We are going to explore this aspect in this video. For deeper levels, I suggest you check out Professor Danesh's material. He is an expert on those. I'm going to share some insights that are very much in harmony with your nature, and you will be able to understand the topics quite easily. But first, it's important to know that in the view of our wise people, in the perspective of Avicenna's medicine, we are not separate from the world. We have a unique connection with it, meaning everything that exists in the universe also exists within us. As my mentor says, man is miniature universe and the universe is a magnified man. Every phenomenon in the world exists within us as well. If you see heat and cold, wetness or dryness in the world, you should look for them within yourself. Of course, this topic has many different aspects, and I'm just going to focus on the apparent aspects in my explanation. Just like in the world where we have heat, cold, dryness and wetness in balance, sometimes things get out of whack. In the outside world, there are places that get too hot. It's the same with people. Sometimes our internal temperature get too high, both physically and emotionally. We get really hot and fiery. Other times it's the opposite. We get cold, both in our bodies and our spirits, and we dry out. These are the same phenomenon that exist in the world, and they have counterparts within us. Think of like this: just as the world has a balance of hot and cold, wet and dry, so do we. Sometimes there is a bit too much heat in a certain region, right? Well, it's the same with people. Sometimes we feel extra hot, both physically and mentally. Other times we get cold and dry. No, let's dive a little deeper. Ancient thinkers in the East saw everything in the world as made up of 4 elements: water, earth, wind, and fire. These 4 elements are also within us. Water is seen as cold and wet. Earth is seen as cold and dry. Fire is seen as hot and dry. Air is seen as hot and wet. The balance of these elements creates different climate and environments. Just like how the equator is hotter due to the angle of the sun. Our bodies can also have dominant elements, and that's where the 4 temperaments come in. Choleric, fiery, hot and dry, like fire. Phlegmatic, watery, cold and wet, like water. Melancholic, earthy, cold and dry, like earth. Sanguine, airy, hot and wet, like air. Everyone has one of these 4 elements dominating their personality, but usually one is stronger. So, understanding your temperament can help you understand yourself and others better. So, to understand these individuals, all we need to do is study and examine fire, wind, water, and earth. For example, what characteristics does fire have? Someone who is very hot and dry, like fire, super energetic, patient, and moves quickly. They're warm, fiery, and never calm down. They're like a flame that heats everything around them and can even burn things up if they get too intense. And can even burn things up if they get too intense. This is what fire does, right? It also describes a choleric temperament. energetic, passionate, and prone to anger. This is one of the sources of anger that Professor Danesh mentioned. Or someone who has too much water in their system is like water, calm, stagnant, flexible. They can adapt to any situation, like water taking the shape of its container. Phlegmatic people are very adaptable, easygoing, and respectful. They are soft, gentle, and moist, which can sometimes lead to being overweight. Then you have someone who has a melancholic temperament. They are cold and dry, like a rock. They are stagnant, unmoving, and imperturbable. It's hard to get through to them. They are very cautious and careful, not adventurous or thrill-seeking. They are like a rock. You don't see them move much. Fire is always moving, air and wind are always moving, but rock stays put. Okay, so that's what melancholic temperament is like. They are not really into change, excitement, or variety. The aim of these explanations was to give you an overview that our body, both physically and spiritually, undergo changes corresponding to these four temperaments or these four states. But the focus of this video is anger and how it manifests differently depending on these four humors. Basically, we are looking at how prone each temperament is to certain type of anger. Let's start with choleric, the fiery temperaments, hot and dry. We said we need to study fire to understand this type. Fire is always ready to burn. It's full of energy and never calm. That's what their anger is like. They are always on the verge of getting angry. Compared to other temperaments, choleric people are the most prone to anger and rage. It's important to know how to handle someone with this temperament. They are like powder cake ready to explode. They get easily agitated, are sensitive to everything, and if things aren't going their way, they get angry and let it out. So, choleric people have a high potential for anger, and it happens frequently. Next, we have sanguine, the air temperament, hot and wet. These individuals are like sudden bursts of energy, a storm. Unlike fire, which is always ready to burn, air isn't always stormy. But when the balance of air or wind is disrupted, it suddenly and unexpectedly transforms into devastating storm, wiping out everything in its path. This is what anger looks like for sanguine people. It happens suddenly and without warning. We call it hot-headed insanity. They do something and don't even know why. It's like they lose control and terrible things can happen. They regret it later, but it's too late. A lot of street fights, arguments, and killings happen because the person involved was sanguine and did things they didn't even realize they were doing. It's a big, uncontrollable explosion, a storm. The difference between choleric and sanguine is the fire always ready to burn. But you don't expect air to be a storm all the time. The storm happens suddenly. The next temperament is melancholic, cold and dry, like earth, like a rock. What's their anger like? Well, these people don't get angry easily. They are like rocks, not prone to moving much, but when they do get angry, it's like an earthquake. You don't see earthquake all the time. If you study earthquakes, you will see they don't just happen out of nowhere. There is a build-up. The layers of earth have been pushing against each other, building tension, and then suddenly it erupts. Sanguine people can get angry without warning, but melancholic people have a build-up. Something that happened 5 years ago might still simmering inside them, and suddenly it all comes out. It's true they don't get angry as easily as sanguine or choleric people, but when they do, it can be massive earthquake. So their anger is like an earthquake, not like anger in choleric person, which is like a fire, and not like air, which is like a storm. We need to study earthquake to understand their anger. In next video, we will discuss about other aspects of this discussion.